I stood in the driveway with my hastily packed bags staring at the two-story colonial house my father left me. The sting of my mother saying, "You need to leave tonight," still echoed in my mind. What started as a regular family dinner had escalated into an explosive confrontation that left me reeling. I loved my mom, but she had chosen my stepdad Thomas and his kids over me. The irony was not lost on me. I was homeless, despite legally owning the house behind me. Before I tell you how I went from homeowner to homeless in one night, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if family drama hits close to home. Growing up, I was an only child with loving parents in our family home. My childhood was filled with backyard barbecues, movie nights in our living room, and weekend projects with my dad. Our house was modest but perfect for us, a two-story colonial style that my parents had purchased when I was just a baby. My father worked as an architect while my mom taught elementary school, and together they created a stable, loving environment. Everything changed when I was 13. My dad suffered a sudden heart attack while working in his garden. One minute he was planting tomatoes, the next he was gone. The loss devastated both my mother and me. We clung to each other during those dark months, after the funeral, trying to navigate our new normal in a house that felt emptier without his laughter. When the will was read, we learned something that would later become incredibly significant. My father had specifically left the house to me, with my mother having a lifetime right to live there. At 13, I barely understood the implications, just that it meant we could stay in our home. The lawyer explained that when I turned 21, I would legally take full ownership, though my mother could continue living there as long as she wanted. For 3 years after my father died, it was just my mom and me. She threw herself into her teaching job, often working late grading papers or planning lessons. I did my best to help around the house, learning to cook basic meals and taking care of yard work that used to be my dad's domain. We formed a different kind of bond through our shared grief, supporting each other through the hard times. When I was 16, my mom mentioned a new colleague at school, Thomas. At first, he was just a name that came up in dinner conversations. Then she started staying out later, coming home with a smile I had not seen in years. I was cautiously happy for her. After months of dating, she invited Thomas over for dinner to meet me. He seemed charming at first, asking questions about my interests and complimenting the house. He was a math teacher, divorced with 2 teenagers of his own. A few weeks later, I met his children, Jackson, who was 16 like me, and Alyssa, who was 14. They seemed friendly enough, complimenting my room and asking about my video game collection. After years of being on my own, the idea of having siblings held a certain appeal. The relationship progressed quickly. Within a year, my mom and Thomas were engaged. They had a small backyard wedding at our house when I was 17. I gave a heartfelt toast, genuinely happy that my mother had found love again. As I headed off to college nearby, I was optimistic about having a real family again. Looking back, there were subtle warning signs that I missed. Thomas asked detailed questions about the house finances and property taxes. His kids would borrow my things without asking, returning them damaged, if at all. My mom became slightly more distant, deferring to Thomas on decisions that we used to make together. Even though our house had plenty of room, and the college was only 30 minutes away, Thomas suggested I should move into the dorms for the full college experience. Not wanting to upset my mom, I agreed, though I still came home most weekends at first. Those weekends became increasingly uncomfortable. Thomas would make comments about how much quieter and cleaner the house was without me there. Jackson would hog the television, switching channels without asking even if I was in the middle of watching something. Alyssa would roll her eyes whenever I spoke at dinner. My mom would nervously try to smooth things over, but never directly address the tension. By the end of my freshman year, I was visiting less frequently. Each time I came home, it felt less like my home and more like I was an unwelcome guest. Still, I clung to the hope that we could become a real family given enough time. When I returned home for summer break after my freshman year, I discovered my bedroom had been partially converted into a home office for Thomas. My personal belongings were boxed up in the garage, with several childhood mementos accidentally damaged during the move. The framed photo of my father and me fishing had a cracked glass, and my trophy collection from high school debate team was missing several pieces. "We thought you would not mind since you are mostly at college now," my mother explained weakly when I questioned the change. "Thomas needs a quiet place to grade papers." I swallowed my objections and moved into the smaller guest room. Meanwhile, Jackson had claimed the basement gaming room that my father and I had built together during my middle school years. Our project had been a bonding experience, complete with custom shelving and a projection system for movies. Now it was cluttered with Jackson's sports equipment and reeked of teenage boy sweat. "You are just a visitor now," Alyssa commented with a smirk when I tried to reclaim some space in the house. "This is our family home." The phrase stung because technically it was my home, but I kept that thought to myself. I did not want to upset my mother by bringing up the will and ownership. She seemed genuinely happy with Thomas laughing at his jokes and looking at him adoringly across the dinner table. Thomas implemented new house rules without consulting me. Suddenly, there were restrictions on when I could use the kitchen, how long I could shower, and even which parking spot I could use in our own driveway. He claimed these changes were about establishing order in a blended family, but it felt more like a systematic effort to push me out. Over the next 2 years, my mother transformed from the supportive parent who had encouraged my every interest to someone who constantly criticized my choices. When I switched my major from business to computer science, she questioned whether I was smart enough for such a technical field, echoing comments Thomas had made at dinner the previous night. During my junior year, Thomas lost his job at the school due to budget cuts. Instead of cutting back on expenses, the family spending increased. Thomas, my mom, and the step-siblings went on a cruise during spring break. When I asked why I had not been included, my mother said they assumed I would be too busy with school projects. The house began to fall into disrepair. The roof leaked during a heavy storm, damaging the ceiling in the living room. Using money from my software development internship, I paid for repairs, since Thomas claimed they could not afford it right now despite their recent purchase of a new television and gaming system for Jackson. When I mentioned the financial contribution I had made, Thomas became defensive. "I would have handled it eventually," he snapped. "Stop trying to make me look bad in front of your mother. I graduated from university with honors in computer science." My family arrived 30 minutes late to the ceremony and left immediately after claiming Alyssa had a dance recital they could not miss. There was no celebration dinner, no acknowledgement of my achievement. After landing a prestigious job at a software company in our city, I decided to move back home full-time to save money while starting my career. Thomas seemed annoyed by this decision but could not openly object, since my mother still occasionally stood up for my right to live there. "Gray just got his first real job," she said. "We should support him while he gets established." My attempts to connect with Jackson and Alyssa were consistently rebuffed. I offered to help Jackson with his college applications, drawing on my recent experience, but he dismissed my offer with a snort. "No offense, but you went to a state school. I am aiming higher." This despite the fact that I had graduated with a 4.0 GPA and had multiple job offers. Alyssa was no better. When I bought tickets to a concert by her favorite band as a peace offering, she claimed she was over that band and went to the mall with friends instead. Meanwhile, Thomas had taken control of the family finances despite contributing less than I did to the household. I paid rent to my mother each month, money that should have gone toward house maintenance and property taxes. Instead, Thomas bought a new motorcycle and took weekend trips with his golf buddies. After finding property tax documents in the mail, I discovered I had essentially been paying for the house upkeep, while Thomas diverted funds to luxury items. When I carefully broached the subject with my mother, she became defensive. "Thomas works hard," she insisted. "He deserves to enjoy life a little." For 3 years after college, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I kept my head down, focused on advancing my career, and tried to minimize conflicts. I told myself it was worth enduring the tension to be near my mom and save money for my future. But with each passing month, the resentment built on all sides. Thomas and his kids clearly wanted me gone, and increasingly my mother seemed to share their sentiment. The breaking point came during a Friday night family dinner. Thomas's parents were visiting from out of state, and my mother had prepared an elaborate meal. I arrived 20 minutes late due to a work emergency, walking into a dining room filled with cold stares and tense silence. "Nice of you to finally join us," Thomas remarked as I took my seat. I apologized, sincerely explaining that a server crash had required immediate attention. Before I could serve myself any food, Jackson cleared his throat dramatically. "Since everyone is finally here, I have an announcement," he said, glancing pointedly at me. "I got accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship." The table erupted in congratulations. Thomas beamed with pride, putting his arm around Jackson's shoulders. "We always knew you had it in you, son. And do not worry about the remaining tuition. Your mom and I have it covered." I offered my genuine congratulations, remembering how my own college announcement had been met with much less enthusiasm. As dinner progressed, Alyssa accidentally spilled her glass of red wine across the table, soaking my new work laptop that I had set aside. "Oh my goodness! I am so clumsy," she exclaimed with exaggerated distress, while making minimal effort to help clean up. I bit my tongue and focused on saving my computer, excusing myself to get paper towels from the kitchen. When I returned, Thomas's father was commenting on how generous his son was. "It is really big of you, Thomas, to let Grayson stay here rent-free while he gets on his feet. Not many stepfathers would be so accommodating." A heavy silence fell over the table. I had been paying $800 in rent each month for the past 3 years. "Actually," I said carefully, "I contribute to the household expenses every month." Thomas's father looked confused. "But Thomas told us this was his house now, that he was letting you stay as a favor to your mother." My pulse quickened as I looked between my mother's suddenly pale face and Thomas's darkening expression. "This house was left to me by my father," I explained calmly. "I legally took ownership when I turned 21. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas's parents looked uncomfortable while Jackson and Alyssa exchanged alarmed glances. Thomas finally broke the tension with a dismissive laugh. "Grayson has always had an active imagination. The house belongs to his mother, who is now my wife. He is staying here out of our goodwill despite how difficult he makes things for everyone." "That is not true," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Dad left the house to me in his will, with Mom having lifetime rights to live here. I have the legal documents to prove it. You ungrateful little." Thomas started, his face flushing red. "After everything we have done for you." "Done for me?" I asked incredulously. "What exactly have you done? Except try to push me out of my own home for years." Jackson jumped in, fabricating stories about how I had been hostile toward him and Alyssa since they moved in. "He deliberately makes us uncomfortable in our own home," he claimed. "He stays up making noise when he knows I have early practice, and he deletes Alyssa's shows from the DVR." Alyssa nodded vigorously, adding her own invented grievances. My mother sat silently, twisting her napkin in her lap, not defending me against these obvious lies. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. "I've had enough of this disrespect," he thundered, turning to my mother. "I cannot do this anymore. Either he goes, or we all go. You need to choose right now." All eyes turned to my mother. In that moment, I saw her internal struggle play out across her face. But instead of standing up for me, she looked down at her plate and whispered words that cut deeper than any knife. "Grayson, I think you need to leave tonight." The betrayal was so profound that I could barely breathe. "Mom," I said softly, "do you understand what you are asking? This is legally my house. I own it. You have the right to live here, but Thomas and his kids have no legal claim whatsoever." Thomas exploded, threatening to contest the will and claiming I was trying to steal from my own mother. My mom began crying, saying I was tearing the family apart with my selfishness. Rather than escalate the situation further, I packed a bag and left, temporarily seeking refuge with my best friend Daniel. That night, as I lay awake on his couch, I realized just how completely I had allowed myself to be manipulated and marginalized in my own home for years. The next day I consulted with my father's old lawyer, who confirmed what I already knew. Not only did I legally own the house, but Thomas had been systematically trying to get my mother to convince me to sign over the property to them. The lawyer showed me emails from Thomas inquiring about options to transfer ownership that had been firmly rejected. For days I struggled with feelings of betrayal and anger. I barely slept, replaying years of subtle manipulations and not so subtle hostility. Daniel helped me see that I had been sacrificing my own well-being in a misguided attempt to preserve my relationship with my mother, who had consistently chosen her new family over me. "You have been giving in for years to make your mom happy." Daniel said one evening as we sorted through my limited possessions. But at what cost to yourself? When do you finally stand up and say enough? After careful consideration, I realized he was right. It was time to stop being a doormat in my own home. My father had left the house to me for a reason, and I owed it to his memory to honor that gift with respect and dignity. With a clear mind and a resolute heart, I developed a methodical plan to reclaim what was rightfully mine. First, I worked with my father's lawyer to prepare a formal legal notice, giving Thomas and his children 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. The document clearly outlined my ownership rights while acknowledging my mother's lifetime residency privilege. Rather than serving the papers impersonally, I arranged to meet my mother at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop halfway between Daniel's apartment and our house. I arrived early, securing a corner table where we could speak privately. When my mother arrived, her eyes were rimmed with red from crying. She looked smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of the situation. "I am sorry it has come to this." I began, keeping my voice gentle but firm. I never wanted to create conflict, which is why I have tolerated the disrespect and mistreatment for years. "Grayson, please," she pleaded. "Thomas has been good to me. His children are family now." "I understand you love him," I replied, "and I have tried to accept that. But Mom, he lied about owning my house. He has been manipulating you, trying to get you to convince me to sign over my inheritance. Meanwhile, his children have made it clear they want nothing to do with me." I slid the legal notice across the table. "I am not kicking you out. You have every right to continue living there. But Thomas Jackson and Alyssa need to find another place to live." Her hands trembled as she read the document. "He will never accept this," she whispered. "He will fight it." "He can try," I said. "But the law is clear. Dad left that house to me, and I have been more than generous, allowing them to live there rent-free while I contributed to the household expenses." I did not know, she admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "About the money. Thomas told me you were just helping with groceries occasionally. I never saw the rent checks you gave him." This confirmation of Thomas's deception did not surprise me, but it still hurt. "There is a lot you do not know, Mom, and I am sorry to be the one to tell you." Our conversation lasted for hours, as I gently but firmly laid out all the ways Thomas and his children had mistreated me in my own home. I showed her bank statements, proving my financial contributions, and text messages from Thomas, threatening to make things difficult if I did not get with the program. When she returned home with the legal notice, Thomas reacted exactly as expected. According to my mother, who called me sobbing that evening, he had flown into a rage, breaking a lamp, and threatening to contest the will despite knowing he had no legal standing. His explosive reaction revealed his true character to my mother, in a way my words never could. Jackson and Alyssa scrambled to secure alternative housing arrangements, suddenly realizing their precarious position. Jackson called his biological mother, begging to move in with her, despite years of minimal contact. Alyssa complained loudly on social media about being unfairly evicted, conveniently omitting that they had been living in my house without my consent. After much discussion and several emotional conversations, my mother and I reached a difficult compromise. She could stay, but Thomas and his children would need to leave. It was a painful solution that I knew would strain her marriage, but I could no longer sacrifice my well-being and inheritance to maintain their comfortable lifestyle. In the weeks that followed, my mother experienced a slow awakening. She began to see how she had enabled the mistreatment of her only son, blinded by her desire for companionship after my father's death. When Thomas moved out and immediately filed for divorce upon realizing his plan to acquire my house had failed, she was devastated but not entirely surprised. "I choose you this time," she told me, through tears on the day I moved back into my childhood bedroom. "I should have chosen you all along. I am so sorry, Grayson. Rebuilding our relationship would take time. Trust once broken does not mend easily." I began seeing a therapist to process the years of emotional manipulation and to develop healthier boundaries. Daniel and my other true friends provided invaluable support during this difficult transition. Gradually, I reclaimed spaces in the house that had been taken from me. I converted Thomas's office back into my bedroom. I restored the basement gaming room my father and I had built together, hanging the repaired photo of our fishing trip in a place of honor. Each small change helped heal a wound from the past. My mother and I established clear boundaries about her continued residence. We created a formal agreement about shared expenses and house maintenance, with everything documented to prevent future misunderstandings. Our weekly dinners together became a time for honest conversations about our expectations and feelings. The reconciliation process began with small steps. Sometimes we would sit in comfortable silence watching old movies we had enjoyed with my father. Other times we would tentatively share memories and work through lingering hurts. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Through this painful experience, I learned essential lessons about standing up for myself. I realized that allowing others to mistreat you does not make you noble. It only enables their poor behavior. Real family supports and uplifts rather than undermines and gaslights. The journey to emotional strength and self-advocacy was difficult but necessary. Today, I finally feel at peace in the home my father wanted me to have. The walls no longer echo with tension and resentment, but instead hold the promise of healing and new beginnings. Has your family ever tested boundaries that forced you to stand up for yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to advocate for themselves in difficult situations. Do not forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about finding strength in challenging family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary growth.